Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories, where we play tales to take you away from today. On the program this time, we have some truly amazing stories.
No way.
It's true. We introduce a book about galactic warfare, hear about a spirit guide in Alaska, a girl has an exciting sleep paralysis experience, and Amanda's grandpa is blue.
Blue. I like blue.
That's nice. Our featured story is a sci-fi classic, and we end the show with Ali versus Marciano.
Amazing!
I know. We begin the show with a detective riddle from California.
And now, a new 2.5-minute mystery.
This 2.5-minute mystery is being brought to you by Patrick Green from Los Angeles, California. Pat is the second person to submit a detective riddle for the show. I think he did a great job. Now, here is our story. We join this 2.5-minute mystery already in progress.
In closing, I want to say I just don't have anything to live for, and for that I'm truly sorry.
Freeze! This is the police. Don't move.
Peters is the first detective on the sad scene. The officer in charge says,
"Bad, this one. It appears he shot himself and left a suicide note in the form of a recording. The only good out of this was his friend found him before the family returned home."
The detective looks over the scene. A man lies on the floor with an old-style cassette recorder in one hand and a gun in the other. Detective Peter asks, "When you arrived, did you press the play button on the recorder?"
"Yes, sir. It was his voice. He said something like, 'I have nothing else to live for. I can't go on,' followed by the sound of the gunshot."
After listening to the report, the detective knew that this was murder and not a suicide. But how did he know?
In just a minute, we'll have our solution. But first, a message from our sponsor.
Do you enjoy these 2.5-minute mysteries? Please let me know. Also, if you have one to share, I'd love to hear it. Go to ronsamazingstories.com and click on the Contact tab. And now, here is our solution. Did you figure it out? If the dead man had killed himself, he wouldn't have been able to rewind the tape on the cassette recorder. That had to be done after the murder was committed. The scene had to be staged, and the main suspect now is the friend that found him. Did you get it right? This 2.5-minute mystery was brought to you by Patrick Green from Los Angeles, California. Pat is the second person to submit a detective riddle for the show. Thank you, Pat. It means a lot to have it.
What's that you said?
Today I have some exciting news for you. I'm happy to say a hearty welcome to the RAS family. KPNL out of Portland, Oregon has added us to the station's Sunday lineup. How about that? KPNL stands for K Paranormal. They are a digital broadcasting station that plays jazz, blues, and folk music 7 days a week, but with a twist. Their music carries the paranormal themes of the podcast, as well as featuring some songs with supernatural ties. Monday through Friday, beginning at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, you can hear your favorite podcasts late into the night. On Saturdays, they host the Beard and Mustache Lifestyle podcast from the Talking Beards. On Sundays, you hear Old Time Radio broadcast. Also, KPNL has special immersive broadcast nights that can only be heard there on their website. You can find out more about these and take a listen to their content by heading to kpnl-db.com. Again, that's kpnl-db.com. I'll also have the link in the show notes. These days, I'm getting a lot of emails, tweets, and messages from you guys about how you're coping. I can't read them all, but I did receive this one from longtime listener Tony Stangert. I did get his permission to read this. Hey Ron, before all of this, your show was just a candy day for me. Now it's become a reason to look forward to Thursday, and it has been a reason to keep track of the days. I've been on self-lockdown for 32 days now. Thank you for helping me during this hell. Living in D.C. as a carpenter, I was locked down early because my job puts me in contact with people who go to multiple homes every day. Finishing an addition on a home isn't essential. It can wait. My electrician is in the hospital right now. He wasn't diagnosed when he texted me, but he was pretty sure because of his symptoms. All we can do now is pray for him. Miguel Hernandez is his name. The more prayers, the better. Stay home. Let's get through this. Love you, brother. Tony. Well, I got chills after reading this. I know from Tony's email and others that we need distractions right now. We don't know when all of this will end, but I echo Tony's statement. Stay home. Let's get through this. I've added Miguel to my thoughts and prayers and hope all of you do the same. To Tony, I say thank you for sharing your story, and please stay safe in D.C. And now we hear this from Audible. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. They have over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, computer, Kindle. Whatever you have, you can listen to Audible on it. So what am I listening to right now? Columbus Day, Expeditionary Force, Book 1, by Craig Allenson. So, what is this one about? I think the tagline for the book says it all. We were fighting on the wrong side of a war we couldn't win. And that was the good news. Here is a clip from the book.
The Ruha hit us on Columbus Day. Every country had a name for the day the Ruha attacked. The common name that stuck after a while was Columbus Day. I guess that makes sense. There we were, innocently drifting along in the cosmos on our little blue marble like the Native Americans in 1492. Over the horizon come ships of a technologically advanced, aggressive culture, and bam! There go the good old days, when we humans only got killed by each other. So, Columbus Day. It fits. When the morning sky twinkled, with what we later learned were Ruha ships jumping into high orbit, we were curious. When power plants, refineries, factories, and other industrial sites around the planet started getting pounded from orbit with hypersonic railgun darts, we were shocked. For me personally, when a Ruha combat transport dropped out of the sky and skidded across a potato field outside my tiny hometown in northern Maine, that was when I became officially alarmed. It was a Monday morning in early October, the Columbus Day holiday in America. I was home on leave from the Army, visiting my folks, taking a break after my battalion got rotated home from peacekeeping duty in Nigeria. What a job that was. I was happy to be home in the States. My leave was ended by a burning streak across the sky as the Ruha transport came directly over my truck. It arced over the lake and crashed in the Olafson's potato field, plowing up dirt and potatoes until its nose was half submerged in a pond. It wobbled side to side for a minute, with a screaming sound coming from its engines. Then it took off and flew low and unsteadily over the tree line toward the center of town, trailing smoke from its underside. Our supposed allies, the Kristang, think that Ruha assault transport was damaged during the drop from orbit and fell short of its intended target, since that is the only possible reason the Ruha would have invaded Thompson Corners, Maine. Hell, I didn't want to be there anymore. That's why I joined the Army in the first place. My hometown is nice enough. It's simply nothing special. There's potatoes and cattle and sheep and other farming, of course. And some people, like my dad, had jobs at the big paper mill down in Milliconic. You could get by with some lumbering, working as a hunting or fishing guide, a little welding on the side, whatever. Nobody in northern Maine relies on one job. Anyway, Thompson Corners is not the sort of vital strategic target that military planners would think of when deciding where to drop from orbit a combat transport with a dozen or so heavily armed troops. The Ruha troops, cute and furry bewhiskered that they are, no doubt waited until their transport finally skidded to a stop on the front lawn of the elementary school in the middle of town, popped the door open, gazed in awe at the magnificent vista of Thompson Corners, and asked the pilot where the hell they were. Soldiers are soldiers, whether they have fur, skin, or scales, so logically, the Ruha lobbed a missile at the most imposing structure in the area, the potato warehouse, and took it out in impressive fashion. I mean, they blew the hell out of it. Those soldiers must have had something against potatoes. Next, they destroyed the two bridges across the Scannicut River, the railroad bridge and the old concrete highway bridge that's been there since it was built by FDR's Works Progress Administration in the 1930s. We'd had a lot of rain, and the river was running high, so with the bridge out, the only way for me to get into town was to drive all the way to Woodford and cross the river there. Like the old New England joke, you can't get there from here, right? Nice idea, if the roads hadn't been clogged with panicked traffic and 100 other people didn't have the same idea I had at the same time. And when I saw that assault ship coming in, trailing smoke behind it, and headed for the center of Thompson Corners, I was already in my parents' pickup truck on my way into town to pick up my sister from a friend's house. It was 10 minutes after the first sights got hit. The radio said the governor had just declared a state of emergency, urged everyone to remain calm. Then all communications went out. No radio, no cell phones, no TV, no electricity. I didn't need to wait for instructions. I was going to pick up my kid sister, get back home, and hunker down with my family until I figured out what the hell was happening. Behind the seat was my father's bird-hunting shotgun and a box of shells that were good for quail and not much else. Shows how clearly I was thinking that morning. All my Army gear, including my rifle, were back at Fort Drum in New York State. I was, after all, on leave. Coming over the hill, I saw the ruins of the bridges and nearly crashed into a line of traffic that was trying to get into town like I was. Bill Geary, a volunteer firefighter and a retired captain from the Maine National Guard, was getting people organized to drive over to Woodford and come into Thompson Corners using the old fire road. I, like a dumb, shouted that my truck had four-wheel drive. Almost everybody in northern Maine has four-wheel drive, even if it's only a beat-up old Subaru. Since I was last in line, I got turned around first, and 3 guys whose car had gone in a ditch jumped in my truck. We roared off like the cavalry coming to the rescue in a movie. By the time we fought through outbound traffic to get across the bridge in Woodford and bounced along the poorly maintained fire road halfway toward town, the Ruha had already secured the center of Thompson Corners. The town was empty because no humans had waited for an engraved invitation to get the hell out of there. One sheriff's deputy panicked and fired off a couple shots with his 9mm service weapon, until the Ruha got annoyed and took out the shell station he was hiding in with what looked like an anti-tank rocket. I've seen Ruha up close since then, plenty of times. No, they don't eat humans, and no, they don't kill babies. Believe the propaganda if you want. I know what I've seen. If that sheriff's deputy hadn't opened fire, the Ruhar might not have killed a single person in town. I couldn't blame the Ruhar. If some idiot was taking pot shots at me, I'd light him up with a rocket too. I know, because I'd done the same thing in Nigeria. Anyway, the Forest Service gate across the fire road was locked. We wasted 5 minutes while a guy 3 trucks ahead of us tried blasting the lock with a shotgun. Surprise! The Forest Service had anticipated somebody trying that, and that lock wouldn't budge. A guy rammed the gate and busted both the gate and the radiator of his truck, which then needed to be pushed off the road before the rest of us could squeeze by and drive through.
Sounds like humans are in trouble with no way out. But this is only the beginning. After the Ruhar established themselves, Christane starships begin jumping in to hammer on them. The humans thought they were saved. UN forces would hitch rides on the Christane ships to help fight wherever our new allies thought we could be useful. So, humans went from fighting each other to fighting in space. But it was all a lie. How good is this audiobook? Well, it was a nominee at the 2018 Audio Awards for Audiobook of the Year. That's pretty good, and you can have this book today. Here is what Audible has set up for us. They are offering a free audiobook and 30 days to give you the opportunity to check out their service. To download your free audiobook, go to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Again, that's audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories, and you can get your copy of Columbus Day, Expeditionary Force, Book 1. Thank you, Audible. And now, it's time for your stories.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
Our first story is a short one, but is a real head-scratcher and thought-maker. It was sent in by May Poole from Anchorage, Alaska. May writes, Ron, I love the show and I share it each week with my dad, who is a retired whaler. We both can't wait for the new programs. I heard you and Sylvia talking about head-scratchers, a phrase I think was coined by Jim Harold of the Campfire podcast. I have one of those, something that happened to me that I just can't explain. Life for the most part is simple in Anchorage. While it is a modern city, it still has traditions and stories that boggle the mind. My grandmother tells a story that happened to her in the 1950s about how a great white bear protected her from a savage storm. It kept her warm and alive until the storm passed and she was found by her father. At the time, people believed the story, calling the bear sent by God to protect her. My story is not as dramatic, but I swear it happened. I believe that we all have a spirit animal. It is assigned to us at birth. All we need to do is discover it, and we have a guide for life. It was a dark time for me that I couldn't see a way back from. I decided it would be better to be dead than to continue on. I went out into the wilds to find my end. I sat down on the ground trying to think of a way to do it, when a wolf wandered in. He was not a big fella. In fact, he looked small, and I knew he posed no threat. I reached into my pack and pulled out some dried fish and offered it to him. He readily accepted the treat and laid down nearby. We talked for a very long time. I told him all my troubles and thoughts, and in his eyes I felt his responses. When I was all done, he stood up and looked at me, and without making a sound, I felt him say, "It would be a shame to lose someone as nice and as important as you." With that, he walked off into the woods. I felt good. I knew that killing myself made no sense, and maybe the wolf was right. I was important. I returned home and told my grandmother what had happened. This is when she told me the story of the great white bear. I'm 33 years old now and have children of my own. I've had a number of chats with my wolf over the years. He always seems to come around when I need him the most. Maypool, Anchorage, Alaska. Well, May, that is an incredible story. I think we all go through dark times and need something to remind us that we're not alone. Be it a spirit guide or a close friend, it is best to talk these feelings out. In the end, admitting that we need help is the first step. All of us are going through something together right now that makes me realize just how important that is and just how much we really need each other. Thank you for sharing your story, May. It is amazing. Our next story comes from Wisp9988, and it was originally posted to Reddit. Wisp didn't want to share her location or real name, but here is her story. A lot of things happened in my parents' house growing up. From hearing voices or our names being called, to things moving around, and even my friends seeing people or other things. Everything that happened was harmless or more or less just creepy, except for this one time. This was in spring of my senior year of high school, summer of 2009. I can't exactly remember the date, but I was 18 at the time. I was up late watching some Adult Swim on TV, laying in bed when my dog, a Pomeranian, wandered into the room. Now, I have to explain the layout for you. Opposite of the bedroom door was a window. Outside that window was the only street light on my road. We lived in the country. Across the hall from my bedroom was a bathroom. Inside the bathroom, we had a stand-up shower with a gold frame. At the time, both my bedroom and bathroom door were partially open. You could see the reflected light from the street light against the shower frame. I turned over on my back in bed and fell asleep accidentally. I woke up later with my dog at my side. I tried to get up to turn off the TV and found that I couldn't move. I panicked for a second, only to realize I was experiencing sleep paralysis. I was so excited. I know who gets excited for that, but it was the first time for me. So yeah, the feeling of not being able to move, the feeling that something is pushing me down on my chest, the lack of control, was exciting to feel firsthand after reading about it so much. I soon realized I was able to move my hands and legs, like from my hips and wrists down. I was able to make fists and kick my legs and feet. It really felt like someone was holding me down. The pressure seemed to get more intense on the back top of my head, and something was telling me, look now. But I couldn't move. Finally, with some flailing around, I was able to tilt my head back slightly and saw in my doorway something was blocking out the gold shower frame. It was standing in my room. I figured I was hallucinating, which was really cool because that was another sign of sleep paralysis, from what I have read. So I'm still semi-calm. That was until my dog started growling at my doorway. He was just in my range of vision, so I could see him head down, fangs showing, with a deep growl. So I'm laying there in this awkward position, watching this thing, and beginning to panic at the realization that my dog is seeing this thing too. I stopped entertaining the idea of sleep paralysis. Honestly, my thought at this moment was, I really don't want to get possessed right now. It became a stare-off for a few seconds until something fell on the ground by my door and the mass flew upwards. Once it was gone, the pressure on me was instantly released and my dog perked up as if someone had thrown a ball and he went running off into the hall. I could move now. I jumped up to go grab him. He ran straight to the kitchen, sniffing around, and I was like, screw this, I'm staying up now. I went back to my room to see what had fallen on the floor. It was my necklace that I had hanging off a picture of my grandmother, one that she had given me just before she had died. I did end up staying awake for the rest of the night and telling my mother when she woke up what had happened. Needless to say, she was quite unnerved. Wisp 9988. Well, Wisp, I have my own view of sleep paralysis, and I have to say your view of it was quite unique. Thank you for sharing your story with us. It is amazing. Our last story for this time comes from Amanda Derricka. She has titled it, My Grandpa is Blue. Amanda did not say where she was writing from. Hey Ron, I heard you asking for ghost stories. This happened to me when I was 12 years old. My paternal grandfather played a huge part in my childhood. I could depend on him for everything. He would step in when I was being punished. He gave me ice cream drumsticks, brought me to meet my friends just because, and drove me around on little trips because I could always lead us back home. This was pre-GPS and Google Maps. When he passed, I was devastated. My family is rather superstitious, so we did the traditional staying overnight thing with each other. I remember the men slept on the floor while the women slept on the beds. Slightly after 2 a.m, I woke up feeling like someone was staring at me. I looked at the direction of the cupboard, and there he was, except that he was blue, see-through, and had no legs. I was really confused. I called out to him, but he didn't reply. After a second or two, he faded away, and I fell asleep again. The following evening, I told my grandma what had happened. She sprinkled some flour on the living room floor because Grandma said that returning spirits would leave some footprints. We also had a little table of offerings for him. A picture of my grandpa, 2 red candles, a bowl of rice, a cup of coffee, and a pair of chopsticks stuck upright in the bowl to signify that it was for the dead. We all went to sleep. I woke up when I heard the clattering sound of pots and pans. I didn't see anything in the room, but I was concerned, so I woke my relatives up. Somehow, we all smelt durian, which was my grandpa's favorite fruit. We threw a pair of scissors out of the room to ward off evil spirits, I guess, and went to investigate the noise. On our way to the kitchen, we all stopped in disbelief. There, on the living room floor, we saw footprints on the scattered flour. Also, the chopsticks were no longer stuck in the rice, but had been placed neatly next to a half-eaten bowl of rice. No family members ever fessed up to eating the rice or leaving the footprints. To this day, I think my grandpa made a little visit on his way to wherever. Amanda Derricka from Parts Unknown. Well, Amanda, first, I had to look up what a durian was. I've never heard of it. It is the fruit of several tree species found in Indonesia, Thailand, and Malaysia. Named in some regions as the king of fruits, the durian is distinctive for its large size, strong odor, and thorn-covered rind. I loved your story, and thank you for sharing it with us. It's well established now that the way you put a question often determines not only the answer you get, but the type of answer that is possible. So, a mechanical answerer, computer if you will, geared to produce the ultimate revelations in reference to anything you want to know, might have some unsuspected limitations. Our story this week is a real mind-bender. unlike anything we've ever had on the show before. When I first heard it, it left me with so many questions that I had to admit, in the end, I was left with, what does it all mean? The story is titled Ask a Foolish Question, and it was written by Robert Sheckley. It first appeared in the pulp mag, Science Fiction Stories, in 1953. I hope you enjoy it. It is read for us by Dan Gorzinski.
Answerer was built to last as long as was necessary, which was quite long, as some races judge time, and not long at all according to others. But to Answerer, it was just long enough. As to size, Answerer was large to some and small to others. He could be viewed as complex, although some believed that he was really very simple. Answerer knew that he was as he should be, above and beyond all else. He was the Answerer. He knew. Of the race that built him, the less said the better. They also knew, and never said whether they found the knowledge pleasant. They built Answerer as a service to less sophisticated races, and departed in a unique manner. Where they went, only Answerer knows, because Answerer knows everything. Upon his planet, circling his sun, Answerer sat. Duration continued. Long as some judge duration, short as others judge it, but as it should be to Answerer. Within him were the answers. He knew the nature of things, and why things are as they are, and what they are, and what it all means. Answerer could answer anything, provided it was a legitimate question. And he wanted to. He was eager to. How else should an answerer be? What else should an answerer do? So he waited for creatures to come and ask. How do you feel, sir? Moran asked, floating gently over to the old man. Better, Lingman said, trying to smile. No weight was a vast relief. Even though Moran had expended an enormous amount of fuel getting into space under minimum acceleration, Lingman's feeble heart hadn't liked it. Lingman's heart had balked and sulked, pounded angrily against the brittle rib case, hesitated and sped up. It seemed for a time as though Lingman's heart was going to stop out of sheer pique. But no weight was a vast relief, and the feeble heart was going again. Moran had no such problems. His strong body was built for strain and stress. He wouldn't experience them on this trip. Not if he expected old Lingman to live. I'm going to live, Lingman muttered in an answer to the unspoken question, long enough to find out. Moran touched the controls, and the ship slipped into subspace like an eel into oil. We'll find out, Moran murmured. He helped the old man unstrap himself. We're going to find the Answerer. Lingman nodded at his young partner. They had been reassuring themselves for years. Originally, it had been Lingman's project. Then Moran, graduating from Caltech, had joined him. Together, they had traced the rumors across the solar system, the legends of an ancient humanoid race who had known the answer to all things, and who had built Answerer, and departed. Think of it, Moran said, the answer to everything. A physicist, Moran had many questions to ask Answerer. The expanding universe, the binding force of atomic nuclei, novae and supernovae, planetary formation, redshift, relativity, and 1,000 others. Yes, Lingman said. He pulled himself to the vision plate and looked out on the bleak prairie of the illusory subspace. He was a biologist and an old man. He had two questions. What is life? What is death? After a particularly long period of hunting Purple, Lek and his friends gathered to talk. Purple always ran thin in the neighborhood of multiple cluster stars. Why? No one knew. So talk was definitely in order. Do you know, Lek said, I think I'll hunt up this Answerer. Lek spoke the Oligrat language now, the language of imminent decision. Why? Ilum asked him, in the Vest tongue of light banter. Why do you want to know things? Isn't the job of gathering Purple enough for you? No, Lek said, still speaking the language of imminent decision. It is not. The great job of Lek and his kind was the gathering of purple. They found purple embedded in many parts of the fabric of space, minute quantities of it. Slowly, they were building a huge mound of it. What the mound was for, no one knew. I suppose you'll ask him what purple is, Ilum asked, pushing a star out of his way and lying down. I will, Lek said. We have continued in ignorance too long. We must know the true nature of purple and its meaning in the scheme of things. We must know why it governs our lives. For this speech, Lek switched to Ilgret, the language of incipient knowledge. Ilm and the others didn't argue, even in the tongue of arguments. They knew that the knowledge was important. Ever since the dawn of time, Lek, Ilm, and the others had gathered purple. Now it was time to know the ultimate answers to the universe, what purple was, and what the mound was for. And of course, there was the Answerer to tell them. Everyone had heard of the Answerer, built by a race not unlike themselves, now long departed. Will you ask him anything else? Ilum asked Lek. I don't know, Lek said. Perhaps I'll ask about the stars. There's really nothing else important. Since Lek and his brothers had lived since the dawn of time, they didn't consider death. And since their numbers were always the same, they didn't consider the question of life. But purple? And the mound? I go, Lek shouted, in the vernacular of decision to fact. Good fortune, his brothers shouted back, in the jargon of greatest friendship. Lek strode off, leaping from star to star. Alone on his little planet, Answerer sat, waiting for the questioners. Occasionally he mumbled the answers to himself. This was his privilege. He knew. But he waited, and the time was neither too long nor too short for any of the creatures of space to come and ask. There were 18 of them, gathered in one place. I invoke the rule of 18, cried one, and another appeared who had never before been born by the rule of 18. We must go to the Answerer, one cried. Our lives are governed by the rule of 18. Where there are 18, there will be 19. Why is this so? No one could answer. Where am I? Asked the newborn 19th. One took him aside for instruction. That left 17, a stable number. And we must find out, cried another, why all places are different, although there is no distance. That was the problem. One is here, then one is there, just like that. No movement, no reason, and yet without moving, one is in another place. The stars are cold, one cried. Why? We must go to the Answerer. For they had heard the legends, knew the tales. Once there was a race, a good deal like us. And they knew. And they told Answerer. Then they departed to where there is no place, but much distance. How do we get there? The newborn 19th cried, filled now with knowledge. We go. And 18 of them vanished. One was left. Moodily, he stared at the tremendous spread of an icy star. Then he too vanished. Those old legends are true, Moran gasped. There it is. They had come out of subspace at the place the legends told of, and before them was a star unlike any other star. Moran invented a classification for it, but it didn't matter. There was no other like it. Swinging around the star was a planet, and this too was unlike any other planet. Moran invented reasons, but they didn't matter. This planet was the only one. Strap yourself in, sir, Moran said. I'll land as gently as I can. Lek came to Answerer, striding swiftly from star to star. He lifted Answerer in his hand and looked at him. So you are Answerer, he said. Yes, Answerer said. Then tell me, Lek said, settling himself comfortably in a gap between the stars. Tell me what I am. A partiality, Answerer said. An indication. Come now, Lek muttered, his pride hurt. You can do better than that. Now then, The purpose of my kind is to gather purple, and to build a mound of it. Can you tell me the real meaning of this?" "Your question is without meaning," Answerer said. He knew what purple actually was, and what the mound was for. But the explanation was concealed in a greater explanation. Without this, Lek's question was inexplicable, and Lek had failed to ask the real question. Lek asked other questions, and Answerer was unable to answer them. Lek viewed things through his specialized eyes, extracted a part of the truth, and refused to see more. How to tell a blind man the sensation of green? Answerer didn't try. He wasn't supposed to. Finally, Lek emitted a scornful laugh. One of his little stepping stones flared at the sound, then faded back to its usual intensity. Lek departed, striding swiftly across the stars. Answerer knew, but he had to be asked the proper questions first. He pondered this limitation, gazing at the stars, which were neither large nor small, but exactly the right size. The proper questions. The race which built Answerer should have taken that into account, Answerer thought. They should have made some allowance for semantic nonsense, allowed him to attempt an unraveling. Answerer contented himself with muttering the answers to himself. 18 creatures came to Answerer, neither walking nor flying, but simply appearing. Shivering in the cold glare of the stars, they gazed up at the massiveness of Answerer. "If there is no distance," one asked, "then how can things be in other places?" Answerer knew what distance was, and what places were, but he couldn't answer the question. There was distance, but not as these creatures saw it. And there were places, but in a different fashion from that which the creatures expected. "Rephrase the question," Answerer said hopefully. "Why are we short here?" one asked, "and long over there? Why are we fat over there and short here? Why are the stars cold?" Answerer knew all things. He knew why stars were cold, but he couldn't explain it in terms of stars or coldness. "Why," another asked, "is there a rule of 18? Why, when 18 gather, is another produced?" But of course the answer was part of another greater question which hadn't been asked. Another was produced by the rule of 18, and the 19 creatures vanished. Answerer mumbled the right questions to himself, and answered them. "We made it," Moran said. "Well, well." He patted Lingman on the shoulder lightly, because Lingman might fall apart. The old biologist was tired. His face was sunken, yellow, lined. Already the mark of the skull was showing in his prominent yellow teeth, his small flat nose, his exposed cheekbones. The matrix was showing through. "Let's get on," Lingman said. He didn't want to waste any time. He didn't have any time to waste. Helmeted, they walked along the little path. "Not so fast," Lingman murmured. "Right," Moran said. They walked together along the dark path of the planet that was different from all other planets, soaring alone around a sun different from all other suns. "Up here," Moran said. The legends were explicit. A path leading to stone steps to a courtyard, and then the Answerer. To them, Answerer looked like a white screen set in a wall. To their eyes, Answerer was very simple. Lingman clasped his shaking hands together. This was the culmination of a lifetime's work, financing, arguing, ferreting bits of legend, ending here, now. "Remember," he said to Moran, "we will be shocked. The truth will be like nothing we have imagined." "I'm ready," Moran said, his eyes rapturous. "Very well. Answerer," Lingman said in his thin little voice, "what is life?" A voice spoke in their heads. "The question has no meaning. By life, the questioner is referring to a partial phenomenon, inexplicable except in terms of its whole." "Of what is life a part?" Lingman asked. This question, in its present form, admits of no answer. Questioner is still considering life from his personal, limited bias. Answer it in your own terms, then, Moran said. The answerer can only answer questions. Answerer thought again of the sad limitation imposed by his builders. Silence. Is the universe expanding? Moran asked confidently. Expansion is a term inapplicable to the situation. Universe, as the questioner views it, is an illusory concept. Can you tell us anything? Moran asked. I can answer any valid question concerning the nature of things. The two men looked at each other. I think I know what he means, Lingman said sadly. Our basic assumptions are wrong. All of them. They can't be, Moran said. Physics. Biology. Partial truths, Lingman said, with a great weariness in his voice. At least we've determined that much. We've found out that our inferences concerning observed phenomena are wrong. But the rule of the simplest hypotheses, it's only a theory, Lingman said. But life, he certainly could answer what life is. Look at it this way, Lingman said. Suppose you were to ask, why was I born under the constellation Scorpio in conjunction with Saturn? I would be unable to answer your question in terms of the zodiac, because the zodiac has nothing to do with it. I see, Moran said slowly. He can't answer questions in terms of our assumptions. That seems to be the case. And he can't alter our assumptions. He is limited to valid questions, which imply, it would seem, a knowledge we just don't have. We can't even ask a valid question? Moran asked. I don't believe that. We must know some basics. He turned to answerer. What is death? I cannot explain an anthropomorphism. Death and anthropomorphism? Moran said, and Lingman turned quickly. Now we're getting somewhere. Are anthropomorphisms unreal? He asked. Anthropomorphisms may be classified tentatively as A, false truths, or B, partial truths in terms of a partial situation. Which is applicable here? Both. That was the closest they got. Moran was unable to draw any more from answerer. For hours the two men tried, but truth was slipping farther and farther away. It's maddening, Moran said after a while. This thing has the answer to the whole universe. And he can't tell us unless we ask the right question. But how are we supposed to know the right question? Lingman sat on the ground, leaning against a stone wall. He closed his eyes. Savages. That's what we are, Moran said, pacing up and down in front of answerer. Imagine a bushman walking up to a physicist and asking him why he can't shoot his arrow into the sun. The scientist can explain it only in his own terms. What would happen? The scientist wouldn't even attempt it, Lingman said. In a dim voice, he would know the limitations of the questioner. It's fine, Moran said angrily. How do you explain the Earth's rotation to a bushman? Or better, how do you explain relativity to him, maintaining scientific rigor in your explanation at all times, of course? Lingman, eyes closed, didn't answer. We're bushmen, but the gap is much greater here. Worm and Superman, perhaps. The worm desires to know the nature of dirt, and why there's so much of it. Oh well. Shall we go, sir? Moran asked. Lingman's eyes remained closed. His taloned fingers were clenched. His cheeks sunk further in. The skull was emerging. Sir! Sir! And answerer knew that that was not the answer. Alone on his planet, which is neither large nor small, but exactly the right size, answerer waits. He cannot help the people who come to him, for even answerer has restrictions. He can answer only valid questions. Universe, life, death, purple, 18. Partial truths, half-truths, little bits of the great question. But Answerer alone mumbles the questions to himself. The true questions which no one can understand. How could they understand the true answers? The questions will never be asked. An Answerer remembers something his builders knew and forgot. In order to ask a question, you must already know most of the answer. End of Ask a Foolish Question by Robert Sheckley.
Truly an odd tale, but one that was, at least for me, captivating. All the way through, I kept hoping that they would ask the right question. But that wasn't the point, was it? If you know the right question to ask, then you really don't need the answer. The author of Ask a Foolish Question was Robert Sheckley. He was a writer who published in the science fiction magazines of the 1950s. His numerous quick-witted stories and novels were famously unpredictable, absurdist, and broadly comical. He was nominated for both the Hugo and Nebula Awards, but never won. Sheckley was named Author Emeritus by the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America in 2001. This is an honorary title annually bestowed by the committee to a living writer as a way to recognize and appreciate significant contributions to science fiction, but they are no longer active or whose work may no longer be as widely known as it once was. The author emeritus is invited to speak at the annual Nebula Awards banquet. I hope you enjoyed this one. I know it was a little odd.
Not so important times in history.
In this segment, we take a look at historical events that may otherwise go unnoticed. We look at history with a fish-eyed lens, giving a perspective that should provide no insight to anyone or any time. But it is historical, or hysterical, as the case may be. Join us now for this event in history. The 2006 film Rocky Balboa has a strange premise. After the current heavyweight champion of the world sees a computer-generated fight between himself and Rocky, he gets upset and challenges the retired Italian stallion to a fight. Probably not going to happen in real life, but this somewhat ridiculous scenario does have a historic precedent. In 1967, radio producer Murray Warner came up with the idea how to settle every pub argument about boxing. He said that by putting all the stats and details of each fighter when they were in their prime into a computer, it could determine who would win. He used the then cutting-edge NCR 315 data processing system with its 12 bits of memory. Compared to today, that's not even 1% of an app on Google Store. It was a publicity stunt, but it was hugely popular. You see, each fight was performed as a radio play, as if the fight were taking place live. One of those radio plays came to the attention of Muhammad Ali in the 1960s. At the time, he couldn't box because of his refusal to be drafted to fight in the Vietnam War. Ali was close to being declared bankrupt. His reputation was pretty much his only remaining asset. So when Warner claimed Ali would lose in the semifinals to Jim Jeffries, Ali threatened to sue. However, ever the canny businessman, Warner instead offered to pay Ali $10,000 to participate in a filmed version of one of these radio fantasy fights. But who would be the opponent? Well, how about Rocky Marciano, who had retired 14 years earlier? Ali needed the money and agreed to the fake fight. Rocky Marciano also accepted the challenge. The two men, who had never met before, allegedly grew fond of each other as they fought in front of cameras for days in order to get just the right footage. The two fighters sparred for about 70 to 75 rounds, which were later edited according to the findings of the computer. Sadly, Marciano died in a plane crash 3 weeks after filming ended. The fight footage was shown as a one-off event in 1,500 cinemas across the United States, and it was an instant hit. The estimated takings for the film were $5 million. Just so you understand, that would be about $58 million today, and for a one-time event, that's amazing. The computer was actually Werner, who knew that Marciano was more popular, had already determined that the retired boxer would knock out Ali in the 13th round. Now, if you want my personal opinion, I think that's highly unlikely. I tried to find some of those old recordings from radio, but it turns out they're still in copyright. Upon the film's release, audiences were misled to believe that the fight was real, and they threatened a second lawsuit upon Werner. The producers quickly announced that all film prints had been destroyed. Debates subsequently took place over the next 3 decades as to whether at least one film print had survived. Following an official discovery of a surviving print in 2005, the film was authorized for release and distribution. On December 27, 2005, the super fight, Marciano vs. Ali, was released on DVD and has been televised several times since. The DVD includes a documentary about the film, audio of the original Fantasy Fight programs, and archival interviews with the fighters that were chosen. And, in case you're interested, the DVD is available on Amazon for about $12. I hope you enjoyed this edition of the Not So Important Times in History. It was brought to you by Gladys Goodies, great treats for your dog to eat. Now, Gladys Goodies has just introduced their newest treat. Little Bits liver sticks are a great source of vitamins for your pet. These treats are great for cats and dogs alike. They are made from 100% beef liver. Liver is a nutrient-rich organ that most pets love eating. You can get these treats and some really cool swag for your dog or cat at GladysGoodies.com. And don't forget to use our promo code, RONS, to get a 20% discount on all of your purchases. That website again is GladysGoodies.com. That was episode number 433, and we have a lot of folks to thank today. K Paranormal Radio, Patrick Green, Tony Stangert, May Poole, Wisp 9988, Amanda Derica, and Dan Gorzinski. Big list with great people. Thank you all. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, just head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you will find links for every need. Do you want to help the show? The best thing you can do is to tell your friends about it, and please leave reviews or feedback wherever you listen. Pressing that follow button helps us to grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.